And that brings me to the last kind of aspect, as I said before lunch, of we focused a lot on impact. I just want to focus a little bit on the return side as well. What is in investment for the investor? And return on investment is one of the practices, I think, that almost moved further and farther than impact assessment. And it's because of the different requirements in social impact assessment or socio-economic surveys, or in disciplines like social return on investment. So a lot of people with the social innovation that's taking place around the world are looking, because if they're an investor, an impact investor, they very clearly want to know what is the return on investment. So really, measuring return is really becoming a very hot discussion topic at the moment. So return on investment follows exactly the same principles as impact assessment. You've got to have indicators, you've got to understand how you're going to find out that information, evaluate it, monitor it, the kind of data that's going to be required to tell you what was the return on investment, but most of all, you're going to need indicators. And that speaks to you, to the question I think you raised yesterday: how do I know I've contributed to sales? How do I know I've contributed to marketing or branding? How do I know all of these things? So the point that I want to make with return on investment is you've got to identify indicators. Now, at this point in time, I want to introduce the last resource. We haven't spent a lot of time with that. And what I've given you is we've spent the first part of this year on what we now call the Investment Impact Index. And what we've done is we've documented our methodology to assess programs, as well as how do we determine return on investment. And if you will allow me, and you can turn to page 52, based on the work we've done over these 700 programs over a period of 10 years, across the kind of industries that we've worked, we've realized there are particular ways and means to show evidence of return on investment. And if you look at it, for instance, we've classified them exactly the same way as we do with impact. When we look at impact economically, environmentally, socially, or impact over time, short-term impact, medium-term impact, long-term impact, or whether we looked at it as direct impact or indirect impact, we've done exactly the same with return on investment. So here we've looked at strategic return, shareholder return, marketing return, employee return, economic return, environmental return. You will remember the case study that I shared with you yesterday, that a specific environmental program was designed because one of the big risk factors for that company was their carbon emissions. So they were looking for a way to reduce that negative impact. So the return on investment from the social investment was very clear. They offset 60 tons of carbons. That is a very clear indicator, and that's typically a return on investment indicator that we've used and developed for measuring that. So we've looked at customers. Now, I've shared with you, for instance, one of the programs of MultiChoice was to involve their customers in their CSI. Now think about the Nedbank Foundation, the course-related marketing, where it's directly aimed at customers. So how do we generate return on investment? Well, we tap into the hearts and emotions, so it's directly related to the brand. So we can test perceptions to show and provide evidence of return on investment from customer perceptions that have improved. Now, in South Africa, the methodology of return on investment is slowly but surely taking off. The first case study that was published was Exxaro, that conducted an SORI assessment of their portfolio. And I just wanted to share that with you. Now, the difference between the SORI methodology and our methodology is that we didn't want to just focus on financial return on investment. We acknowledge in a development context there's a lot more other value, like supporting license to operate, like supporting environmental impact. So we use part of this process because a number of our clients want to know the financial impact, but we went one step further. But this was the first case study in South Africa that is available in the public domain. So if you want to search for this and you want to interrogate this, you can see here. So the two case studies that I've got on the board is the bakery. So for every R1, to just interpret the findings, the SORI, so the social return on investment, was for every R1 that Exxaro invested in this Butterfield bakery, the return on investment was R3.25. So it's a 1 to 3 return on investment. Question is that good or is that bad? Well, that is the reason why I've added the other two portfolios for you. So the same methodology was applied. They've tested it against their HIV initiatives in their health portfolio. There's the bakery, and then there's the Skills Academy. So you can see their return on investment in HIV was much higher than in the bakery, and the lowest return on investment was in skills development. Okay, and then I've just added this one to just give you a little bit, because now the next question is how do they determine that? Okay. Okay, so SORI it's a standard methodology. I will admit, it is the most complex methodology I've ever worked with. I think the only people who get this are actuarial people. Because you need proxies. You need, for instance, to say what is an economic return on investment in a bakery, you've got to look at the total economic value of that community, the contribution of the bakery, and then how did you determine those proxies? Are you going to look at jobs? Are you going to look at taxes? Are you going to look at GDP? It's very complex, just saying. But what they've done in their case study, if you download the report, they will tell you how they've done it. So in order to determine that 3.25 Rand, they have mapped the stakeholders involved in the bakery. Then they looked at the kind of inputs. They followed the logic model framework here. The activities, the outputs, the outcomes. Here are the indicators. So in the bakery, for instance, one of the indicators was a change in profit. So the proxy for that value was the value of the change. So the bakery went from 1 million turnover to 2 million. So there's R1 million worth of difference. Then they adjusted that for debt weight. They've adjusted it for a calculation ratio. And that's how they got to the end result. I can tell you we very seldom use this methodology because here's the problem on the continent: the access to data. I've told you yesterday how expensive it is for us to subscribe to statistics and databases. So if you want to really have an understanding of that bakery in that community, you need to drill down to the economic data of that town. And I can tell you that's very hard to find in all cases. So remember, you've got to do that for health. So what would be the proxy for health? People dead or people alive? Or the cost per patient in a government hospital or in a private hospital? Can you see what I'm saying? So access for us on the continent. So SORI is in a methodology that's really applied in the US and in Europe because data is so available. Everybody's looking for data. But on the African continent, our access to data is really prohibitive. Nevertheless, I do not want to detract from this case study. There is a precedent created for it in South Africa.